Hi friends. It's been nearly a week since I last worked on my Nissan 720 pickup. 1985. Maybe you know it at this point. Anyway, last Wednesday I finished putting the rebuilt transmission in this truck, drove it around for a little bit, and my fears were confirmed. I did not put the transmission back together completely correctly. There is a gear in the transmission that I flipped around from how it came out. I thought that was the right way. I assumed that whoever previously rebuilt the transmission, if it even were rebuilt, I'm not 100% sure it was, but based on the sealant, I don't know if it was factory. Anyway, I flipped it the one direction, and I have now found out that was incorrect. It should be the way it came out. It's the countershaft drive gear. I'm gonna get the transmission back out of this thing, open it up, flip that gear around, and put it back together. It's really the only option. I discovered that last Wednesday. It is now Monday, June 1st of 2020, and I want to do this thing. I've been driving this vehicle in the meantime. It's fun, it's great. I appreciate my grandmother for allowing me to use it. It's her car. This, though, is mine, and I love it, and I want to get it running well. I've done some work on the engine. While I've got a full battery and a full memory card, why don't I share a little bit about this thing? Sure, the lighting isn't the best, but maybe you can see immediately, you know, what's not factory on this basically is a new battery as of nearly a year ago, a new carburetor as of about maybe 6 months ago. It was during the winter I put this Weber carb on with an adapter kit made for this engine. I was having some issues with the choke and maybe other things on the stock carburetor setup. Decided to upgrade it, and that deleted a few of the vacuum systems, and it ran throughout the winter for me. What you can't see, and what I did well over half a year ago now, last late summer, fall, when I bought this car 1 year ago, I bought this truck 1 year ago. Pardon me, I call it a car often, but it is a truck. It has a frame and all of that, right? So it had a bad noise, a mechanical noise, and maybe I should not have even bought it, but I'm glad I did because it's been a great project, and really I like this truck a lot. I digress. The timing chain was sloppy, was flapping around in there. It took me a long time. I troubleshooted other issues, fuel. I did a fuel filter. I checked the fuel pressure. It's a carburetor, so it doesn't need that much. The fuel system's quite simple. Spark system, I did the rotor. I did the cap of the distributor. I did new plug wires and new plugs. That didn't solve it. And eventually I realized after looking at some forums that it was what had happened and what the symptom was, which I'll explain the story very quickly. About 2 months after getting this, I had been getting to know the vehicle. I'm driving along the highway at about 70 miles per hour, cruising. All of a sudden, I didn't do much with the accelerator. I wasn't, flopping it around or anything. It just dropped in power. It bogged down out of nowhere. And I troubleshooted it for about a month or more until reading a forum, saying, hey, Nissan 720, low power issues. someone mentioned their timing chain. And so I took this cap off. Whoa, that's on there. Okay, I don't want to struggle with that too much right now. I don't know why it's so tight. I took this cap off and I looked down there, and the timing chain is right here in the front of the block. And I could see down there that the guide, not guard, it's a guide, the chain guide, I could see it through there with a flashlight, through the oil fill cap there in the valve cover. I could see the issues with the timing chain. And I went, here's my face. I went, maybe not so much externally, but internally, right? I was concerned. And now here we are 6 months later, I did it. I did the timing chain replacement. I bought the parts online, timing chain. You know, it came with the chain itself and the two sprockets. The sprocket that goes on the cams up here, the sprocket down below that goes on the crankshaft. It came with the two guides, and it came with the pressure, the tensioner rather, that puts pressure on the chain. It's run off of fuel, it's run off of the oil pressure of the engine, I believe. It has an oil spot in it where the pressurized oil that is circulating around the engine comes up through a cylinder that has the piece that is actually the tensioner that sort of rides along the chain, and that pushes, the chain is right here, it's going around, and this is on the side and it pushes it. Well, that's what had gone bad in my engine originally, I believe. I think that's what originally shot it, was somehow probably the chain hadn't been replaced in so long that it was so slack that it was so slack that the tensioner came out of its hole where it's supposed to seat into. Maybe that's what happened. I'm theorizing. So once it came out of there, then this chain no longer had any tension. So it was slapping the guides, and that was the horrendous noise. And it ate up the guide, especially the one on the driver's side of the block. It ate up that guide until it was completely gone. Then it was riding on the inside of the block and on the head. So that is shaved down a little bit. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm sure there's some metal shavings in my engine, but now I've changed the oil multiple times, of course, since doing this timing chain replacement. So much talky, so much for short story, right? Okay, timing chain replaced. Last fall. It drove quite well, but all along, a year ago, what I bought here, knowing the issue, I should correct myself. My father helped me purchase this thing. Being as out of money as I was, he helped me purchase a vehicle. Shout out to dads. The owner, the previous owner, actually, the previous seller, who was the previous owner's brother, the person who sold me this was the owner's brother, described this as his brother's recycling truck. And I guess why that is helpful to know is, like, his brother was basically an alcoholic, mostly on beer, I guess. Maybe other things too, but he would fill the back of this up with beer. It did not have the topper. He kept it in his garage, apparently, which we can attest to based on it being 35 years old. And I mean, here's our rust, body rust. I mean, look at that. The corners are fine. Everything's fine. Oh, that doesn't look so good, but that was actually this last January while I owned it. I got rear-ended while I was parked. That's $1,600 from that insurance claim because the man who ran into me was the kind of person who reports mistakes that he makes, and he makes rights out of those wrongs, and I appreciate that a lot. And that $1,600 went into my bank account, and I spent it on things like the Weber carburetor. So yeah, the carb came after that incident. So that was January sometime. Here we are, June 1st. What I've done to this thing. This is still the stock hose, but I've had to do a few things, and I did buy a replacement hose for this, the upper radiator hose, but it did not fit very well at all. So I'm still rocking the stock, and just put these nice stainless steel hose clamps on there, because the stock clamps that were in this vehicle were these little, they were made out of wire, and you can see one down there, maybe, if that's enough light. But I reused that one for the new. I put a new hose there, so that's a bypass hose. If you can see where my finger is, the lighting is not great, and I know lighting is so critical in filming. But that's what I got. So basically, I'm just trying to summarize my changes to this vehicle, which are pretty minuscule thus far. It's a battery. It's some things to do with the cooling system, basically a new thermostat. I cleaned things, new gaskets, of course. Just from taking off the timing chain cover here on the front of the block, you inevitably replace quite a few gaskets related to that. Not the head gasket, which apparently the head gasket was done shortly before I purchased this thing, around 100,000 miles. And now we're at I think a whopping 117,000 miles on a 1985. This is a Nissan Z24, 24 standing for 2.4 liters worth of displacement. So these 4 cylinders, 2.4 liters divided by 4 is some number that each cylinder displaces of air. You probably already know that if you're watching this, but a little lesson. Cooling system. Fuel, I did the fuel filter. And the biggest thing obviously is replacing a carburetor with an aftermarket setup. So that's my fun aftermarket thing. And then another aftermarket thing, I guess, is NGK plug wires and NGK plugs. And by plug, I mean spark plug. Going from the, aftermarket, non-OEM, probably CarQuest grabbed. CarQuest, thank you. Cap and rotor on the inside of there. So we've done a little electrical work, the basics. We've done a little cooling work, the basics. We've done a little bit, or kind of a lot of it, with fuel. Because putting on an aftermarket carburetor in a carbureted vehicle is kind of the biggest thing you can do for the fuel side of a combustion engine. I haven't really touched the engine at all, other than changing the oil very frequently and switching to synthetic, which I am still not sure was the right move. After thinking about it more, I've studied mechanical engineering. That's what I took in college. And you wonder, there are things people will tell you, all sorts of online mechanics will tell you, don't switch your engine oil if it's been running conventional for its entire life. Keep it on conventional. And from an engineering standpoint, and thinking about lubrication and thinking about how metals possibly become impregnated with certain elements, if you switch up the oil, maybe there's something to that. I'm not a material scientist. I took that an INSEE bit. I know lubrication is critical, and critical lubrication is something. My engine is still running. It's doing okay. I think I need to tune up. I mean, I have a timing light. I've got my timing set on factory settings, which I think is 4 degrees before top dead center or something. The carb, I've messed with it a few times. It generally seems to be doing well. I was having some issues with run-on, aka dieseling, in the early stages, but that was in cold weather in winter. I mean, I drove this thing. I'm here in on the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin. We get cold, and we made it. Other than that, I got new rubber on it. Walmart deal, Black Friday special, freaking great. Got 4 of these bad boy Wrangler radials. White out, of course. I got this topper on it about two weeks after getting it, so I could probably say I've had the topper now for 1 year, and I've had the truck for 1 year and 2 weeks. My goats have been back here. It's great. This is my goat mobile, by the way. When I got rear-ended while I was parked, the rear window of this topper smashed, spider-webbed. So I removed all of it, and my plan is to replace it with plexiglass. And so I have a sheet of plexiglass that I have made one score and snap on. Product placement. No, thanks. No, I mean, what? Don't peel that off. Okay, this is my cardboard template, and obviously that little project of replacing the rear transparent material in the rear of the topper has, been put on hold while I get the truck mechanically functional, because I'm not going to be hauling any goats in a truck that can't go down the road, right? So, priorities. Holy goodness, I'm a good talker, but I also like to think of myself as a good worker. And my plan right now is to shut up and start working on this truck. I know exactly what needs to be done. However, I'm hoping, or not hoping so much as just plotting, that I may be able to, and why don't I take you under here with me to play it out? I'm wondering if there's a way that I can remove the transmission without removing the exhaust. The exhaust is right here in our face, and there's the transmission right there. I believe I could possibly get away with taking out the tranny and not removing the exhaust. This is super low lighting. I am not sure at all if the GoPro is picking it up, and I'm guessing it's not. But I'll tell you what I'm seeing right now is that the exhaust manifold coming off of the block, coming down really from, I should say the down tube coming off the exhaust manifold, gets really tight up against the transmission on the driver's side here. And so that might be wishful thinking to try to remove the transmission without removing the exhaust, or at least dropping the exhaust down. The only reason I would want to avoid removing the exhaust again is pretty much the only reason is that it's just another maybe hour or 2 of work, because it requires because of the custom exhaust job. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Why didn't I say that? I had the exhaust redone, sort of, halfway, when I was troubleshooting the power issues of my truck, which inevitably were due to the timing chain skipping because it was so loose. While I was troubleshooting that, I cut the exhaust before the catalytic converter, because I had read online in a few places that people were having low power issues due to a clogged or malfunctioning catalytic converter. And that was not my issue. But regardless, I now had an exhaust that was cut right before the catalytic converter, which was really okay in the end. I patched it up, I did the timing chain, and drove the vehicle for maybe a month or two with that patched exhaust system the way it was. But it never sounded very good, of course, because it was leaking out of the patch. And once I had enough money and decided it was worth it, I brought it to a affordable exhaust shop where they promptly welded a new section of exhaust at the point where I had cut it, put on a new hanger, a catalytic converter, which was certainly the priciest part of it, or, you know, it was 1 hour of labor at $100, I think. $100 something for the catalytic converter, and $50 for the muffler, and $50 for the, or less than that, you know, a couple tens for the rest of the tubing. And, you know, all of that he custom bent and welded together within an hour's time or an hour and a half. So it was about $300 total to get my exhaust system repaired and proper. And so now it's a proper exhaust system, I would say. It's got a cat where there should be a cat, and a good muffler where there should be a good muffler, and the tailpipe where there should be a tailpipe. And it's hanging on 2 hangers, and then it connects up to the header. Or, no, sorry, not the header. It's a manifold. The reason I say header is maybe I've contemplated the idea of doing a header on this, but for the time being, that $300 is still standing up. But when I go to do work on my transmission and need to take out my exhaust, now what would from the factory be 2 pieces is 1. And so it's a little more difficult to work this exhaust out from under the vehicle, which is silly, you think, but it's like it's got funny twists and bends in it, right? An exhaust system has funny twists and bends. And when you lift a truck up, even, you know, a foot, maybe 16 inches up in the air, it's still, you got to maneuver this thing out of the way. And what I discovered last time and what I had done previously, I get this truck jacked up as far as I can with my jack stands, which you'll see is maybe 18 inches, 1.5 feet. When I drop my exhaust, it just gets stuck between a truck and a hard place. And that hard place is my rear drive shaft. So I have to remove my rear drive shaft to get my exhaust out, which isn't that big of a deal. It's not. It's 1 more hour's worth of work, and I've been sitting here talking for nearly 25 minutes. So I'm gonna shush up and get this thing frickin' fixed, man. Peace and love to you all.